Today's video will be covering XLQ Tips and Tricks Part 2. We'll be focusing in on making XLQ workbooks. Everything we share is for educational purposes only. They're not recommendations, and you're responsible to do your own due diligence. When you have an idea for an XLQ workbook, the first thing you want to focus on is the architecture or the format of the workbook. It's best, in my experience, to draw your idea out on a piece of paper or in an app like Paint and get an idea of the overall look that you're going for, the overall structure, where you want certain data. You can think of this page as a main landing page where all the important data is going to be centralized. Then transfer that picture or that structure into an Excel page. You're roughing it in. You're giving the layout of your idea on paper into the actual XLQ workbook. It's also a good idea to add borders around your data for the ease of your eye, as well as creating a more finished look for your workbook. Borders also have an extra advantage in that you can hide formulas in the border for additional functionality. What you would do is type your formula in the border and then find the exact same color for the font that you used for the fill, and it will blend right in. One of the best time-saving things that you can do is create a primary template page. What it is a universal Excel page format that will retrieve similar data. And the idea is that you fine-tune your template first. Make sure you're happy with it, make sure all the formulas are correct and it's producing the data and information that you want. And then you can simply copy and paste it onto new pages or into new sections. After you've copied it, then all you need to do is adjust a small portion of the data on the new page and then you're done. In this example, I have a watch list template. I got it just the way I wanted. I wanted to see the percent change from open. I wanted the information to be ranked from high to low and low to high. And then I was able to simply duplicate this page either by copying and pasting it onto a new Excel page or using the copy function at the bottom of the tab and make additional watch lists covering the tickers that I was interested in. First, you don't want to have to create each one of these pages over and over again from scratch. And second of all, I really want to stress that you want to make sure that your template is correct, because if you find an error or something you're unhappy with, if you catch it early enough on the template page, then you only have to make that correction once. But what if I use this template to make 8 or 9 or 10 watch lists and I discover an error? Well, then I have to go and change each and every one, or copy and paste the template again and then re-enter all the different tickers. So try to make sure your template page is correct. Another consideration is building in expandability in your workbook. What I mean by that is you want to fill in additional columns or rows so that as your ideas evolve and develop, as your skill expands, you might find that you want to make some adjustments or additions to your workbook. You can see in this example, I have additional columns for closing information, volume, relative strength, and up-down volume ratio. So if I want to add or expand my ideas on these particular categories, I've got room. But when I'm not using it, I simply hide the extra columns or hide the extra rows until I need them. So the workbook looks clean and orderly, but I also have built-in expandability. Now you might ask, why would you want to do that? When you start to build a workbook, especially one that has a large amount of data, it starts to become problematic to insert columns and insert rows because it affects so much other data down the line. It has to change all the formulas, and it can take a very long time depending on the size of your workbook. It can also freeze when you try to do that. So it's just better to build in a few extra rows and columns in case you need them. It's also helpful to have changeable data source cells. What I mean by that is, rather than having the data source provider integrated into the formula in each and every cell, just put it at the top and you lock it with the F4 key. Notice as I push it, it changes the formula. First it's B1, then B1 with dollar signs in front of the B and the 1, then in front of the 1, then in front of the B. That's a way to lock how the cells are copied. So for example, if I'm going to drag this row down, I always want it to refer to this data source. And so I lock it. Completely locked locks the row and the column. You can lock the row or the column individually if you want. So always make a visible and changeable data source cell. This way, if you're having problems with your data provider, you can switch to another one. If you have a page that extracts a lot of different or additional data, you can provide multiple data sources for each section. If you're also using formulas that can have an adjustable look back period, it's a good idea to make that available as well. Here is a moving average. So if I want a 10 moving average, I can just type it in. If I change my mind later and want a 20, I can type it in. I don't have to change all the formulas individually. Another advantage of having multiple data sources available, this allows you to split the load between several different providers. You might have a broker handling one section, Yahoo handling another. It provides a lot of flexibility and options to help prevent you from getting the too many symbols error in your cells. And not only that, some data providers return better or different data than others, especially on the free data providers. You might find that Yahoo does a great job at returning volume information, but TD Ameritrade does a better job at returning range information. So build in flexibility so that you can change it easily and quickly. When making a workbook, you want to reduce the amount of data usage that you have in it. One of the main ways that I do that is by creating a master data page. From there, I retrieve all the data from the master, and then I import it, so to speak, into whatever page I need it to be. A lot of times I'll like to create a retrieval page template. It's similar to the templates we just covered, except instead of having an XLQ formula in it, it merely referenced data from the master page. Here's an example. This is a master page that has percent change data in it. You can see the XLQ formula here. Here is a retrieval data page, and instead of having the actual XLQ formula, it simply references where on the master data page the information is and in what cell. The goal is to reduce the too many errors symbol. Each data provider, whether it's free or paid for, has a certain limit on the number of API requests or the amount of data that it will give you or the number of tickers it will provide information for. You can retrieve data into any independent page that you might have from your master page, or onto a main landing page that I usually call the dashboard page. That's an area where all the information that I'm interested in is consolidated for a quick overview. This approach ends up using less formulas, and it reduces duplicated data, which in turn will minimize the amount of API data requests that you have every day. The very best XLQ workbooks will combine XLQ formulas, but also XLS, Excel formulas, Excel functionality. You can blend and integrate the two seamlessly. If you want to learn more about XLS, you can go to YouTube when you're stumped. There's so many free and fantastic resources online. I think XL is Fun is absolutely one of the best XLS learning channels that there is on the internet. Here's his web address if you're interested. You can also search XL is Fun with no spaces in between. The guy who runs this channel is Gavin, and he's a college teacher. And what's great about his videos is that you can download the accompanying Excel documents for each one of his lessons. He has over 3,000 videos on Excel formulas, and he does a great job at explaining things clearly and simply. Let's talk briefly about managing data formulas. When I first started making XLQ workbooks, I had really simple formulas in each cell because I didn't know what I was doing. But as I progressed, my formulas started becoming longer and longer and more complex, encompassing multiple data ideas. That was actually something I wanted to work towards. I wanted a more compact workbook, more compact pages, instead of data sprawling all over the place. And that worked to a point. But then it tipped to the other side, where I had such complicated formulas that it started making things very difficult. So I do recommend that you break formulas into smaller bits. It doesn't mean you can't improve on your formulas as you become more skilled with XLQ and XLS. I think it's better to keep similar or like data sets together. So an example would be, rather than having percent change and volume and a close all into one formula to break them up into the respective categories. Keeping formulas in smaller bits makes it easier to track. It's easier to verify that you're getting the data you actually want. The data will be more adjustable. And overall, it'll just make your life a lot easier not to have an extremely complicated and lengthy formula in one cell. I also prefer to use an if-error formula with pretty much all of my XLQ formulas to produce a clean look in the overall workbook. I don't like to see error signs. I'd rather have a blank section than something full of error data. There's a couple of tools in the XLQ program that you should know about. One is how to view the status and how to check your preferences. One way is to do the hover. You come down to the bottom of the task menu, click on this icon, and then hover over the queue, and it will tell you if the historic data is up to date and how your connection is. You go to the same area, but this time you right-click on the queue, and this pops up. A little menu that offers different ways to view data, refresh data, pause data, adjust your preferences. In the About section is where you enter your registration information. Here's the view status. You click on whatever historic data provider you're interested in, and it will tell you if it's processing that data or not. It's simply under View Data, you scroll over to Status. Preferences are where you adjust your time frame. XLQ has a good help file, so you can always go to Help Topics if you need further information. You'll find that when you start working with especially large workbooks that have massive data sets or very long lookbacks, 252 sessions, 700 sessions, as it gets longer, you face the hurdle of your workbook freezing or taking insanely long time to load and get all the data. If you want to reduce frustrating data freezes and wait times, it's a good idea to turn off the auto calculate. You can find that under Formulas, Calculation Options. Select Manual instead of Automatic. Pause Data Retrieval in the XLQ pop-up menu. It's also a good idea to minimize conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is on the home page. It's where you can highlight cells, highlight text, create color schemes. If you do too much of that, it can really slow down your workbook. If you have a format that you have copied and pasted into other rows or columns, you want to go up and make sure under Manage Rules that you don't have multiple conditional formats going on at the same time. If you find any competing conditional formatting, be sure and remove it. You can do so by clicking Edit or Delete once inside the conditional formatting menu. When you're developing a very large workbook, you want to fill in the minimum amount of information in each page, just enough to make sure that you have the formulas correct. Here's an example. I have over 1,400 tickers and I'm doing a look back of over 252 sessions. Rather than filling it all in, I only do a minimum of rows and a minimum of columns, just enough to make sure that my XLQ formula and information is correct. Then I go on to the next page and the next, doing the same thing. When I'm sure that everything's ready, that's when I will go ahead and expand all the data right at the end, because it will slow the workbook down considerably, because it takes time to retrieve all that data from the data provider. Another technique for workbooks that have a massive amount of data on each page is simply to make each page its own individual workbook. Put them all in a folder, get them just the way you want them. You can expand all the data, but then wait until you're done with each and every one to combine them, either by moving or copying them all into one workbook. It also helps to make sure that your computer temperatures are cool. When you're processing a lot of data, it causes your computer to heat up, and by keeping it cool, you'll get maximum performance. If you find that your computer is running slow or seems kind of herky-jerky, check and make sure that you don't have an update. If you do have an update in the queue, go ahead and update your computer. You might also make sure that you have the most recent and up-to-date version of XLQ installed. It's not a bad idea to also run maintenance software that you have for your computer. If you have an antivirus, a defrag, or a registry tool, anything that you use to keep your computer healthy, if you start to notice the performance slowing down considerably, it might be time to run some of those. Let's turn our attention to efficiency. If you're making multiple XLQ workbooks, and you intend on importing that data into a PowerPoint and perhaps then turning that PowerPoint into a PDF. Maybe you're going to have a daily report, a weekly report, and a monthly report. And basically, they're going to cover all the same information. You're interested in gaps, or you're interested in on above average volume, whatever it may be. And rather than having to copy and paste the same information from each individual workbook into each individual PowerPoint, the day information into the day report, the weekly information into the weekly report, and so on. You name them all the same, Bullish, Bullish, Bullish. And then you name the report what it is, Bullish Dailies, Bullish Weekly, Bullish Monthly. You keep them in individual daily and weekly and monthly folders. This will allow you to extract all the information that you've copied and pasted from your Excel workbook into your PowerPoint, if they all have the same format and the same structure and the information is all in the same location. The same is true for the names that you give the pages. Rather than saying 3 days up and then 3 days down, I just put 3 days up down. If I want all these PowerPoints to extract the same information from the same location in each report, and I don't want to have to recopy and repaste a linked object from an Excel workbook into a PowerPoint, then it's important to have the Excel workbooks named the same and the pages within each workbook also named the same. A critical topic is protecting your data. When moving columns and rows, it can take a very long time, especially in large workbooks. It takes a great amount of time to reshuffle the data throughout the entire workbook through all the cells, and it can also cause freezing. Sometimes data can get jumbled. Formulas can lose their reference cells, and then you have to go retype the formula all over again. Merge cells can make it very difficult to rearrange data. So the best solution is to have the built-in expandability. But if you find yourself in a position where you don't have that, there's two scenarios. One, maybe you have a column or a row. Maybe it's empty, maybe it has data in it, and you don't want it anymore. You can delete the data, but don't delete the column. It's better to cut the column and then paste it at the end of the workbook or wherever there's space at the end of your page than it is to simply use the delete button. If you use the delete button, it will delete the reference cell for a lot of your data, and it can really jumble up the workbook. It's always better to cut and insert than simply delete a row or a column. When you have your workbook just about the way you want it, go ahead and lock the sections of the cells. I lock everything I possibly can on a workbook. The way you see if an area is locked is right-click on it, go to Format Cells, Protection, and then you'll see Locked, Checked or Unchecked, and Hidden, whether you wish to hide the formulas or show the formulas. I lock everything I can unless it's adjustable, such as the data provider, or a moving average, or my tickers. You want to be careful when you use the hide formula function. Be sure to save a copy of your workbook where the formulas are not hidden and keep it somewhere safe. Malfunctions do occur. I've had it happen myself, so you want to be sure and always keep a copy that shows the formulas. Select a password that's easy and write it down in multiple places. You can protect the pages of your workbook as well as the workbook itself. You just go to the Review button and you can see Protect Sheet or Protect Workbook. When you protect the sheet, it just protects each page. When you protect the workbook, it keeps all the pages in order so they can't be moved or jumbled about. The Review section is where you can protect and unprotect your workbooks and your sheets. If you're going to copy and paste tickers from another workbook, you absolutely want to make sure those cells are unlocked. If you inadvertently copy some tickers from another workbook where the cells are locked and then you save your workbook, you will be saving those cells as locked. Now when you're first starting out, or even if you're experienced in building a very large, complex workbook, XLQ is very easy to use, But there is a learning curve, like everything, and sometimes in learning curves you can experience some frustrations. But you can also experience some technical issues with your computer, with your Excel program, and so on. Here's a few things you can do to keep yourself from becoming frustrated or going insane. Save your work frequently. Save your workbook anytime you make a change that you want to keep. The good rule of thumb for should I save it now is, how would I feel if I had to go back and redo all the work I just did? And if you wouldn't feel too good about it, then you better save your work right away. Be sure to review the topics that we covered on minimizing things that cause your screen and your program to freeze that I covered previously. I think there's a tendency when you're starting out to work on a workbook with some of the ideas you have. It gets jumbled, you get confused, you throw that aside and you start another workbook and then another workbook. Then you have a bunch of workbooks scattered around. It's much better just to consolidate all your ideas into one workbook. Just start a new idea on a new page within that workbook. That way you don't have multiple copies of files all over your computer with half-finished workbooks and half-finished ideas. Be sure and create multiple backup copies of whatever you're working on, and be sure to keep the last prior version. If you have a workbook, we'll call it workbook number 1, and you open it up and you work on it. You want to save it, you want to copy it. Then you open it up again, which we'll call workbook 2, and you work on that for a while and you make significant changes. Well, go ahead and save that and make a backup copy of that as well. But be sure to keep a copy of that first workbook, just in case information gets jumbled or if there's a problem with your Excel opening up your workbook. Be sure to back up your XLQ work in different places. You can have a copy on your desktop or another in a folder, or you can back it up in your Dropbox, an external flash or hard drive, or even another computer. Computers experience problems and you don't want to lose all your work. Use revision numbers to keep your workbooks orderly. Maybe you're going to do a market review workbook, so go ahead and call it Market Review 1.0. And then as you add pages to it and make significant changes, it can become 1.1, 1.2, or you can go to the next number, 2.0. I found it's better to name your workbook and to have a version or a revision number next to it rather than having just a date. If backing up your work multiple times or clearing out a folder, when you copy and paste your workbooks and you're replacing another, to be sure and look at what the dates are on the two so that you are not replacing a more current version with an older version. Anytime you copy and paste something that already exists in a file or a folder, the computer will ask you what you want to do. Do you want to replace it? Do you want to keep both of them? Or do you want to keep the one that's already there? So look at the options, compare the dates. In general, when you're starting out, you want to work with smaller rather than larger workbooks for speed. If you're having trouble, there's a few things you can do. One, you can restart your computer. If you're still having trouble after that, you can reinstall your XLQ software and restart your computer again. If problems continue, you want to make sure that your computer doesn't have an update that needs to be installed. It can really slow things down. A topic many might not consider is protecting your hands. You should know right off the bat that charts are a lot of work to make. There's a lot of clicking going on. So if you're going to do charts, be sure to use the template concept. Get a chart exactly the way you want it, then copy and paste that chart over and over, and all you have to do is reselect the data that you want the chart to cover. Use the copy and paste templates or frameworks whenever possible. Always consider ways to reduce clicks. A simple example that comes to mind is if you wanted to change the size of a font, maybe from 11 to 22. Rather than going click, 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 just hit the pop-down menu and select the size font that you want. Whenever there's a way to reduce clicks, you want to do that. One helpful way is keyboard shortcuts. Instead of copying and pasting by clicking on your mouse, you can use the shortcuts that are on your keyboard for Excel. You can find all the Excel shortcuts online. They're too numerous to mention here. I will highlight a couple that I have found helpful. You can either drag across or drag down when you see a crosshair. Go to a cell, click on it, and there's the crosshair. And now I could drag across or drag down any information that I wanted. If I want to highlight something, I can use Control, Shift, and the arrow key. So maybe I want to highlight this. I select the cell, hold Shift and Control at the same time, and then I'm going to use the right arrow key, and it highlights. I can do the same thing with the Control, Shift, and down arrow, and it will highlight things. Whenever you can select something, select over clicking. To copy and paste, instead of using your mouse, you highlight what you want and you hit Control C at the same time. And you see the lines that have circled around the box, the perforated lines. That tells you it's been copied. To paste, you simply put the information where you want it and click Control V, and that will paste it. Another way to prevent repetitive stress is to have an ergonomic mouse in work area. I have more than one mouse. I have ones that are different sizes so that it works my hand and my arm in a different way. Here's an ergonomic mouse. You can find information on equipment on my website if you're interested in this particular mouse. You can also do stretches. Be sure to stretch your hands and your arms. I prefer XLQ2 over the other ones that are available. It's faster, it has more formulas and more data options. XLQ has excellent technical support by its creator, Leo. He's just a wonderful guy. He's knowledgeable, he's smart, and he's helpful. Try to keep your workbook simple rather than complex, especially when starting out. It's helpful to make a landing dashboard, and it's also easy to have all your information consolidated in one area. The truth is, your XLQ workbooks will only be limited by your imagination and your understanding of XLS formulas. You can make your own XLQ dashboard and have it exactly as you want, or if you don't have the interest or the time, you can hire others to do it. If you're interested in some free starter workbooks and more videos of what's possible with XLQ, you can go to my website, zazencapital.com. Here's the page. Tools, XLQ XLS, and here we go. There's some helpful videos, some tips and tricks videos, there's some starter books, and then there's more videos discussing some of the dashboards that I've created just to give you an idea of what's possible. Calculators, backtesters, intraday dashboards. There's all kinds of wonderful things you can create with XLQ for your trading. You can also find other XLQ videos on my YouTube channel. If you found this or any other video I've created helpful, or any of the educational information that I post for free on my website, please consider making a donation to the Children's Therapy Center. It's a fantastic nonprofit organization that helps kids with special needs. And if you don't have any money to give, you can shop using Amazon Smile, based in Kent, Washington, as your charity. Then a portion of all your purchases will go to help support CTC and the good work they do. If you'd like more information and free educational resources, go to my website. There's book recommendations, webinars, presentations, and resource links. I also share tools and trades that I've made for anyone who might be interested. I hope you found some of this XLQ and XLS information helpful. Thanks for watching, and good fills, everyone.